The human story is the search for belonging. From childhood to adulthood, in joy and in struggle, we all sit in questions of how to make sense of it all. What is our place? Why are we here? What is our story of searching? Join us in conversation with community members, each sharing some of their own story. I am Ben Spratt, and this is Belonging.
So I have the true honor and pleasure to be sitting with fellow CRS member and dear friend, Risa Schessel. So many things to say about Risa, but a few words. So for 18 years, Risa was actually in brand management, running licensing divisions at Time Inc. and Hearst Magazine. She is now the executive at Harmel Realty, a family-owned residential real estate company. And in the context of Voda Shalom, she and Harry have been members here for 18 years. Their two children, Bradley and Lauren, have grown up here in the midst of our community. Risa was our Parents Association president in Voda Shalom School and a trustee on the board of Voda Shalom School. And she's now on the board of Impact 100, New York City. And so much of her time when she's not working and devoted to 1,000 of the people around her that rely on her, she is a person who's volunteering her time to try to lift up the people around her, especially here in New York City. Risa is also a recent adult Bat Mitzvah in the adult B'nai Mitzvah class of 2023. And so in so many ways has been a present, ever devoted member of this community, but also really modeling what it is to be the builder of connection at a time, especially, I think, more than ever, where we're wanting to feel those threads. Risa, a joy to have you with us today. So, as always, want to begin with a prompt. Tell us about your search for belonging.
Thank you, Ben. I am honored to sit with you today and have this conversation. And you and I have chatted so many times over the years, and you know so much about me. But I was part of the advisory group helping you think about the podcast, and so I completely get the importance of belonging and the concept of belonging. But it wasn't until you asked me to sit and talk with you today that I had like a lot of ahas, and a lot of those ahas came back to you, ironically or not ironically. A lot of that, I think I've realized, and you and I've talked some about this, my Jewish journey and my sense of belonging in the first time in my life I ever belonged really was when my kids started school here. What I don't know that you realized at the time, where you were the first rabbi I ever knew. I grew up with very little sense of being Jewish and my Jewish identity, though I knew I was. You know this, but I had a very unstable childhood. Moved 8 different times, 8 different schools, and the only real sense of my connection to knowing I was Jewish growing up was my grandparents. They were pillars in the Jewish community in Miami. My grandmother was, honored by the City of Hope and a big donor. And my grandfather actually owned one of the first health spas in the country. But then it was more like a resort. And so all the Jewish people from the Northeast would come down for Passover every year. And he led this Passover service, the only holiday I really celebrated growing up. But the family all had to sit on a stage. And I was painfully shy growing up. So it wasn't this experience where I really came to understand my identity or understand celebrating the holidays, but I still got exposed to it from my relationship and connection with them. But I moved so many times. I didn't go to Hebrew school. It was my turn. Everyone in my family had a bat mitzvah, but I was so shy I had to move schools again. And I said to my parents, please don't make me. Unbeknownst to me, they were about to get divorced, so they were like, okay, fine. So I, really wasn't a big part of my life except for a few times a year doing more, Jewish things. Went to school in Texas, University of Texas, and I joined a Christian sorority, and I started going to Bible studies and church with my friends. And, looking back years later, I realized it was part of my search for belonging. I really it felt like a fish out of water a lot of my life, and a lot of insecurities and shyness. And eventually my mom sent a rabbi to meet with me when she learned about it. And I started to realize that this really wasn't me. But it wasn't until I moved to New York, and living in New York and being around a Jewish community, and even then starting to be invited to friends' homes for a Shabbat dinner or to celebrate a Jewish holiday, was really the beginning of my not feeling like as much of an outsider, feeling connected to something, even though I didn't understand it that well. Then I married Harry, my husband. We were late bloomers. We got married a little bit later. We had our kids pretty quickly. And he grew up Orthodox. And it was just, there was no discussion, but our kids were going to go to a Jewish day school. We looked at a lot of them. We visited Road of Shalom, and it was, for our mixed backgrounds, the right place. The synagogue was like a church to him at first, though now it's beloved. He used to leave services and go to an Orthodox service after. Now he is as much a part of this community as I am, but that was really the beginning for me of like feeling really close and watching my kids with this unbelievable Jewish education and understanding. And, I'll never forget the day my daughter was little and she saw Rabbi Loffer when she was here in the street. And she was, 3 or 4. And she was like, Mommy, my rabbi. And like my heart just felt, And I then got quickly involved with the Parents Association and started meeting with you and working on opportunities to, it was Mitzvah Day was the first thing, bring the school and the synagogue closer together. And it was really the beginning of my starting to understand why my Jewish identity was important, my starting to feel like I belonged in a community for the first time, my starting to be able to create this childhood I didn't have. I can go on, but it was really the beginning of what was a big pivotal change in my life. And, really just this feeling of belonging and connecting that just continued to grow.
I love the illustration, to think about your grandparents and to think about maybe the journey that they would have imagined or architected for you. And ultimately, the perhaps somewhat circuitous route that brought you back to the place of starting to claim Jewishness for your own and shaping a Jewish family. And, there's so much parent anxiety, especially as our kids grow up, of how Jewish will they be? And when they go off to college, are they going to go to, the Hillel? And I think your journey is actually a really important one for us to surface, that sometimes we have to walk out into the wilderness. Sometimes we have to be in the Christian sorority to start to allow some of those questions to stir and imagine, wait, maybe there's something about me that feels like it's in contrast to this world. Maybe there's something actually within me that's whispering. And I'm wondering, as you and Harry are raising Bradley and Lauren, they're thriving at Road Shalom School, you find your place in the Parents Association. At what point did you start to realize the Jewishness wasn't just about what Harry wanted and what you thought was good for the kids, but ultimately something that was for you?
Having my kids, starting in the nursery school was really the beginning of my education in a lot of ways. And it was a very gradual education. Like they were learning about the holidays and I was learning about the holidays and going through the Bat Mitzvah process, a year ago, a lot more of it connected. And a lot of it was like, I got to reflect on Mona Ani in my, in the service. And I've brought that into my life in a deeper way. Like I've always been, gratitude, etc. And I don't say it every morning, but it's something that never would have thought I'd be doing. But now I would say like at least every once a week or so, before I get out of bed, I think about that prayer. And I think because of the childhood I didn't have and what I wanted, in a way, this connection enabled me to start to create traditions in our home. Every year to this date, we host every Jewish holiday. And I didn't have a lot of family, so over time that became friends, and now it is a lot of friends. But we had everybody over for Shabbat, and so we started creating these traditions that through time started sinking in more for me, the meaning of them and the pride in my kids and the values. I would say the 4 of us each have a different relationship with it. But as my son is now at college, he kind of went like a little bit. He went to high school and got a little away, oh, why do we have to go to services on a holiday or something? And then he's now got a relationship with the rabbi where he goes to school. And I got a picture one day, I couldn't believe this, of him repping tefillin at Shabbat on, on Friday night with his fraternity. And it's not that he's suddenly become, going to services all the time, but he realizes, and it makes me so happy, that is his community.
I notice in myself sometimes slipping into more of the American frames of religion, which often are more about, I would say, belief and identity than necessarily practice. And it's interesting in Judaism because religion is obviously only one of the facets of Jewishness, culture, language, art, so many other facets to it. And it's sometimes the behaviors that become most interesting, obviously for you, the practice of gratitude holds a level of wisdom and understanding that many, go their whole lives reaching to really understand, what does it mean to really, truly, profoundly be grateful? What does it mean to be grateful with the moda'ani, to wake up every morning and be grateful that we've been given back our soul. We've been given another day. If you're willing, I would love to have you take us back 11 years and, talk about some of the ruptures in life and what you went through and what emerged on the other side.
11 years ago, I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage. I had a brain bleed, and it's a miracle that I'm alive today. A whole series of things that occurred, that tied back to people in this community, actually, who are the reason I'm alive. And I got to the hospital when I did. Didn't really know until I got out of the hospital. It was a year and a half of healing. I had no idea that I almost died more than once. And, as I've spoken about this, but, probably definitely the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life, and in a lot of ways was one of the best things that ever happened, because I learned so much through the experience of healing. I learned about community in a way I never really could have fully grasped, and I learned about how important it is to let people give, because I was a giver. I was always, because I was a pleaser growing up. I wanted to be the perfect kid, and maybe I'd get more, love and attention. So my whole being was about making other people happy and not knowing how to accept people taking care of me. And the synagogue and the school community really literally carried my family through this time. And in the process of healing, because the brain heals very slowly, and I am so blessed that not only, did I heal, but that the aneurysm was in a place where there really wasn't, much long-term damage. I learned I had to slow down. There was a lot of things I didn't remember as my brain was healing. I have this beautiful memory of you and I. People would come and take me for a walk as I was getting my energy and slowly moving. And I remember sharing some things with you when we went for a walk one day, just about how incredible it was to live in the moment in a way I never had, because I was a doer and going and being, and I never really knew how to live my life completely in the moment.
And for most everyone, obviously, there's something in our life, that takes whatever architecture we've been able to give to our journey. There's something invariably that shatters those structures, that veers us off the path. And for some of us, we spend a great deal of our time in rage, in disappointment, in the would've, the should'ves, the could'ves. And I can look back over my shoulder, but nothing good is going to ultimately come from that. In many ways, I have to look at where am I right now and what are the opportunities in front of me. And I think that for many of us, myself included, I often struggle to get to that place. I often struggle to not imagine what could have been or might have been if something awful hadn't happened. For all of us who are listening, and all of us who go through pain, heartbreak, trauma, how did you find a way to simply say, all I can do right now is figure out this next step from this place?
I think because of so much I went through in my life, I was older when I had kids. So, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to have kids. There were just blessings abound in my life. I don't know if maybe because I didn't have so much growing up, and I don't mean financially or whatever, but I didn't have a sense of myself belonging anywhere and confidence or any of those things that, gratitude, I think, was just sort of built in for me in whatever way. And I was blessed with this unbelievable community that just hugged me and my family too. So it was just, what would be the point of putting energy into anything else? And don't get me wrong, it's not like I don't, have my things that bother me and regrets and this and that. It's not like I live this life of gratitude all the time. But I don't know, just the realization that we have a choice. Every day we have a choice.
It's such an interesting layer of wisdom, especially I think at a time where I think for most of us, and I include myself in this, we get to a place where we start to realize that the very injustices we've experienced, the very pain that we have endured in time actually can become the very sources of strength, can give us the grit, the resilience, but also the perspective. And I think that's what I've always loved, Risa, is that you went through something that forced you into the reality of vulnerability and fragility that we all truly exist in. None of us know what's going to befall us this day. And to let others know they're not alone in whatever is going through them. So the number of people that I know that have sat with you and have turned to you for counsel and wisdom as a result, I think in some ways is almost the best way of how do we pivot? How do we dance in a world that is sometimes very difficult and painful? But I know part of this journey of 11 years is also facing what you've lost, the parts of yourself that at times feel frustrating now, the ways in which your image of yourself doesn't always map into the reality of what you experience. And I was wondering if you're open to it, just to tell us also about that, because it's also it wouldn't be doing you honor to simply just say, you went through something that, puts you on the brink of it all, and, thank God your life was saved again and again. You've also had to go through a very difficult journey of healing, a difficult understanding of what does this chapter of life actually mean? And I'd love to hear some of that journey if you're willing.
I feel like despite menopause and things that happen with age, my ability to retain things and my memories and my comprehension sometimes is not what it should be. And that has scared me a lot and worried me a lot. And I've tried to, in fact, it's resulted in my becoming a Bat Mitzvah, because the thing I decided after learning a lot about brain health a couple of years ago was learning things was really important. And so I decided to learn Hebrew. And when I started to take Hebrew lessons, I then journeyed into becoming an adult B'nai Mitzvah, because that was sort of a next step that you and Shana encouraged. And, it was an incredible journey. So again, life has challenges and we go through things, and I went through something huge, but we all go through different things. And I think I get as much from the people around me. I'm never shy about sharing, whatever it is. And up until I was probably 30, my closest friends knew nothing about me, until one day I realized the more I share and the more people know who I really am and my imperfections and my challenges and all those things, the more I can connect with other people. And I have a lot of friends who I turn to, a lot of friends who give me advice or me counseling, or, even when I was younger, both my sister and, my two closest friends who are like sisters. There are many times, through the years when they've had to stop and say, slow down, Risa. No. You're going down a road, or you're, have given me great advice. So I feel it's a privilege to be able to share. I guess I think the more we put out into the world, the more we get back, and, maybe there's a selfishness in that, but that's okay. I'm okay with that.
So I think about, for myself as a parent, I've got a rising junior in high school and a rising sixth grader. And, I think it's, for me, been an ongoing blessing that I've also had my experience as a parent growing up a little bit with your wisdom and care and, your advice over the years. Really, Risa, I think back over so many conversations of you pouring forward some of your own learnings, the things you feel like you've done perfectly or well as a parent, and the things that you've maybe I could have done differently, and the way in which you saw a young rabbi trying to find his way and trying to find his place. And the generosity of your heart and your spirit has always been one where I have felt you always leading with a sense that we're all kind of bumping and, bumbling along on this journey of life. And at least what we can do is we can do it together. There's the biblical story of Joseph, who, through his own inability to see the effects he has on his brothers and the world around him, he's thrown into this pit. And he goes through this long journey of adversity, ultimately, though, rising up to be, the viceroy in Egypt. And there's a rabbinic imagination that he ends up later in life going back to the pit, and he offers a blessing, and he blesses the pit. And I think about that for a moment, is how do we get to a place where we are willing to do the work, whether it's in therapy or with good friends, that we choose to go back and see that sometimes our journey requires the pit? How do we come to even bless the pit? Not to put the pink bow or the red bow on it, but to acknowledge that it is a part of our journey, whether we like it or not. And then can we ultimately get to the place that Joseph says in his life, that ultimately this was what allowed me to get to this place in this moment, and the blessing that I'm able to bring into the world. And I feel like that's how you go through life these days, Risa, is rather than spend so much energy trying to shake your fist at the things that have befallen you in life, to simply say, well, here I am, this is what I have, what can I offer? So I'm curious, with that lived wisdom, how do you try to plant that as a seed of wisdom for Bradley, for Lauren, for Harry, for me, for so many others? How do you take that of what exists now inside of you and bring it out into the world so that perhaps others can glean from it?
Again, I agree, first of all, with what you said, in that, I'm thinking, as you were talking about, like, therapy, which I think is, it's a privilege and it's an extravagance in a sense, and everybody should have it. And when I went into therapy and started looking at my childhood, et cetera, sometimes you have to take a lot of steps deeper into depression and, just get to a worse place to get to a better place. And, in a small way, when I'm feeling sad or feeling depressed, it often gets me to go volunteer, in a soup kitchen or doing something like that, because, it's selfish, it's just like, I need to stop and like, whoo-hoo, hello, and, appreciate, because in New York and in life in general, kids have these crazy schedules and they're over programmed. And, my son Bradley was, hockey was a huge part of his life. And, it was for the good or bad, and I struggled with it, became a big part of our life. And I was, not happy that our family didn't have more time to volunteer together and do things together. And we did, to the extent that there was time and, between my daughter's activities and this and that. But I think I finally realized the best thing I can do is role model for my kids. And, if my kids were sitting here now who are 17 and, was 20, and you ask them, what's something your mom has said so many times every year, they like roll their eyes and they would say to you, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. That was like this mantra I always tried to instill in them, and the importance of empathy and the importance of giving back. And when they were younger, I kind of like made them get involved in things. But as they've gotten older, I think because of what they've seen around them, and fortunately, I think their appreciation of what they do have, they're so far from perfect, because none of us are. I see them in little ways and in big ways getting back. And I do credit raising them in this community. I do credit what they got out of being at a Jewish day school. I do credit them what they learned going through the B'nai Mitzvah process. I think a lot of that, it takes a village. It absolutely takes a village. And then your kids go out and you just pray you've given them the right foundation. And, as we all know, they reach an age where they have no interest in your advice or what you have to say. So you just have to step back and, when they let you, try and give them some guidance. But I think it took me a long time to realize, like, the best thing I can do is live my life. I think it's just, the best thing I realized we can do, in as imperfect as we are, and all the parenting mistakes I've made. And, just dwelling and looking back on it, it's, doesn't help.
I can't think of a more important thing to celebrate in so many ways. I think, one of the lessons from our sacred scripture and from liturgy is this idea of, limnot yameinu, teach us to treasure each day, which obviously falls into the realm of cliche for many of us. We hear that all over the place, gratitude journals, we should all have gratitude practices, mindfulness practices, but few of us actually engage in it. And it's interesting, how do we look at this moment and realize that we could respond to a universe that is sometimes hard, a life that is sometimes a disappointment, and we can wallow in it, or we can look and see that there are embedded in every moment, even the moments of shadow and darkness, there are sparks of light. And the only way we can claim them is by saying that waking up this day was a gift. It doesn't mean it's not also a curse, but can we claim the gift part of it? Can we choose to be learning? Can we choose to be giving? Can we choose to be, if we're going to be something, can we choose to be kind? So I just want to offer gratitude, Risa, because I think for all of us that look at the journey of our life and can name absolutely the beautiful peaks, but also be able to see those difficult valleys that we have walked through, it's in the wisdom of how to connect those two things together and see that one can only rise into prominence in contrast to the other, that we come to really live in that wisdom, that you modeled for us as you were teaching us Modeh Moda'ani. And I think exactly what you said to me when we took that walk many years ago around the reservoir, that it's in treasuring each day that we're given that in some ways we get the greatest clarity of what is our place and our purpose. So thank you for your friendship, your wisdom, and being a teacher and modeling so much for so many. What a gift to be in conversation with you, Risa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. The honor was mine to have this dialogue with you, so thank you.
Thank you for joining us and listening to this story of belonging. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at Ben H. Spratt. For more information about CRS, visit us online at rodofshalom.org.